Rachel Dawson is a hard-working single mother in the small town of Maplewood, where everyone knows your business and judges it. Her husband Noah left her without explanation 3 years ago, leaving Rachel to raise their 12-year-old daughter Zoe alone. The whispers have never stopped. She must have done something, people say behind closed doors. For Zoe, life has become a quiet battle against labels like broken home and troubled kid. But beneath her shy exterior lies a brilliant mind that sees magic in discarded wires, scrap parts, and broken electronics. This story matters because it's about more than just survival. It's about finding strength when the world turns its back. It's about believing in yourself even when others don't. And most importantly, it's about how one moment can change everything. What happened next? Stay tuned to uncover the truth. Let's begin. Rachel Dawson woke up before dawn, as she always did, to the faint hum of her alarm clock. Her small apartment was quiet except for the occasional creak of old floorboards and the distant chirping of birds outside. She tiptoed past Zoe's room, where her daughter lay curled under a patchwork quilt, clutching a notebook filled with sketches and scribbles. Rachel paused for a moment, watching Zoe sleep. There was something fragile yet unbreakable about her, the way she carried herself through life despite everything they'd been through. Maplewood wasn't an easy place to live after what happened 3 years ago. Noah, Rachel's husband and Zoe's father, had walked out without explanation, leaving behind only silence. No note, no phone call, just empty space where a family used to be. At first, people whispered sympathetically, but soon those whispers turned into accusations. She must have driven him away, they said at the grocery store or over coffee. Old friends stopped calling, and new ones never came around. Now, Rachel worked 2 jobs, as a waitress during the day and cleaning offices at night, to keep them afloat, while Zoe navigated school alone. Zoe didn't talk much, but that didn't mean she wasn't thinking. In fact, her mind raced constantly, piecing together ideas most people wouldn't notice. She saw potential in things others threw away: broken motors, tangled wires, rusted screws. To Zoe, these weren't trash, they were treasures waiting to be transformed. Lately, she'd been working on something big, an invention she called the energy step, a shoe designed to generate electricity with every step. It was ambitious, even for someone twice her age, but Zoe believed in it wholeheartedly. One Saturday morning, Rachel found Zoe hunched over their kitchen table, surrounded by scraps of metal and tools borrowed from Mr. Thompson next door. "What are you building now?" Rachel asked, trying to sound lighthearted despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "It's almost done," Zoe replied, holding up a prototype. "If it works, it could power lights or charge phones. Maybe even help people who can't afford electricity." Rachel smiled weakly, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're incredible, you know that. But don't stay up too late, okay? You need rest." "I will, Mom," Zoe promised, though both knew she wouldn't. For Zoe, sleep felt like wasted time when there was so much to create. Later that evening, Rachel sat at the edge of Zoe's bed, staring at unpaid bills scattered across the dining table. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and if she couldn't come up with the money, they'd lose the apartment. The thought made her chest tighten. How could she protect Zoe when she barely kept herself afloat? Meanwhile, Zoe tested her invention again, this time connecting it to a tiny bulb. When she tapped her foot against the shoe, the light flickered briefly before going dark. Her heart leapt. It was progress. But then frustration set in. Why couldn't she get it to work consistently? She clenched her fists, determined not to give up. As Zoe adjusted the wiring one last time, a spark jumped from the circuit, startling her. For a brief second, the entire room lit up, a fleeting glimpse of what might be possible. The next morning, Rachel received a letter from her landlord. If the overdue rent wasn't paid within 10 days, they'd have to leave. Panic bubbled inside her. How could she support Zoe's dream when they were on the verge of losing everything? Just as Rachel debated whether to sell some of their belongings, another envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to Zoe, with the school logo stamped on the corner. Inside was a note: "Congratulations. Your project has been selected for the science showcase." But as Rachel read further, her stomach sank. Zoe would compete against older students with access to advanced resources. Could Zoe really hold her own against such odds? The letter from the school felt like both a blessing and a curse. Rachel held it tightly, her fingers trembling as she read it again. Zoe, standing beside her, tried to mask her excitement with nervousness. "Mom, do you think I can do this?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel forced a smile, though her mind raced with doubts. "Of course, you can," she said, pulling Zoe into a hug. "You're smarter than anyone gives you credit for." But deep down, Rachel couldn't shake the fear that this opportunity might end in heartbreak. Zoe had poured weeks of effort into her invention, but the world rarely rewarded quiet brilliance, at least not without a fight. At school, news of Zoe's selection spread quickly. Some classmates congratulated her half-heartedly, while others snickered behind her back. "Did she bribe someone to get in?" one boy muttered loud enough for Zoe to hear. Another girl rolled her eyes, saying she probably just glued some wires together and called it science. Zoe kept her head down, pretending not to notice. She told herself it didn't matter what they thought, only what she could prove. Still, the whispers stung more than she let on. Even teachers seemed skeptical. During lunch, Ms. Carter, her homeroom teacher, approached her cautiously. "Zoe, are you sure about this showcase? It's competitive. Maybe you should focus on smaller projects first." "It works," Zoe replied firmly, clutching her notebook close. "I've tested it. I know it does." Ms. Carter offered a sympathetic smile before walking away, leaving Zoe feeling even smaller than before. At home, Rachel noticed the change in her daughter immediately. Usually eager to share updates about her project, Zoe now sat silently at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her sketches. "What's wrong?" Rachel asked gently, sitting beside her. "Nothing," Zoe mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "It's just, everyone thinks I'm wasting my time." Rachel sighed, placing a hand over Zoe's. "People will always doubt you, sweetheart. That's their problem, not yours. What matters is that you believe in yourself." But believing wasn't always easy. Later that night, Zoe stayed up late, tweaking the wiring inside her shoe. Every adjustment felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the pressure of proving herself. Her hands shook as she connected the final piece, and when she tapped her foot against the sole, nothing happened. Frustrated, she threw the shoe across the room, tears streaming down her face. Rachel heard the thud and rushed in, finding Zoe curled up on the floor. Hey, she soothed, kneeling beside her. "Talk to me." "I'm tired of trying," Zoe choked out. "What if it never works? What if they're right?" "They're not," Rachel said firmly, wiping away Zoe's tears. "You've already done something amazing. Don't give up now." The next day, Zoe returned to work with renewed determination. She scoured junkyards and recycling bins, searching for parts to improve her design. One afternoon, she stumbled upon an old battery pack discarded near the electronics store. It was exactly what she needed, a breakthrough moment that reignited her hope. As Zoe soldered the new component into place, the shoe suddenly emitted a steady hum. For the first time, the light bulb stayed lit for more than a few seconds. A grin spread across her face. It was working better than ever. On the morning of the showcase, Rachel received devastating news. Her boss scheduled mandatory overtime, forcing her to miss Zoe's presentation. Heartbroken, Rachel begged him to reconsider, but he refused, citing understaffing issues. Who would stand by Zoe now? At the showcase, Zoe nervously set up her table among flashy displays of drones, robots, and sleek gadgets. Judges moved from booth to booth, barely glancing at hers until one stopped and sneered, "Is this supposed to be cute?" The words hit Zoe like a punch to the gut. Would anyone truly see the potential in her invention, or would she remain invisible? The gymnasium buzzed with excitement as students, parents, and judges milled about, admiring the rows of polished projects. Zoe stood behind her modest table, clutching the edges of her prototype like a lifeline. Her invention, a worn-out shoe rigged with wires and a blinking light bulb, looked out of place among the sleek drones, glowing circuits, and futuristic gadgets surrounding her. She could feel the weight of stares and hear the murmurs growing louder with each passing minute. "Is this some kind of joke?" one judge muttered, barely glancing at her display before moving on. Another stopped briefly, tilting his head skeptically. "Adorable," he said with a dismissive smirk, walking away without another word. Each comment pierced Zoe's confidence, chipping away at the fragile armor she'd built around herself. She glanced toward the entrance, hoping to see Rachel walk in. But there was no sign of her mom. Rachel had promised to be there, but work obligations kept her tied up miles away. Alone and overwhelmed, Zoe wondered if she should just pack up and leave. What was the point of staying when no one seemed to care? Just then, an older man approached her table. He wore a tweed jacket and carried a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. His presence commanded respect, yet his eyes held warmth and curiosity. "Hello," he said kindly, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Henry Mason. May I ask what you created here?" Zoe hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. Most adults only wanted to mock or patronize her. But something about Dr. Mason felt different. Taking a deep breath, she began explaining her project, the Energy Step. As she spoke, her voice grew steadier, fueled by passion. She described how the shoe converted kinetic energy into electricity, its potential applications for rural communities without access to power grids, and even her dream of making renewable energy accessible to everyone. Dr. Mason listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Zoe finished, he leaned closer, examining the shoe more closely. "May I see it in action?" he asked. Nervously, Zoe tapped her foot against the sole. The light bulb flickered to life, casting a soft glow across the table. For a moment, silence fell between them. Then Dr. Mason straightened, his expression shifting from curiosity to awe. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "Do you realize how groundbreaking this is? This isn't just a clever idea, it has real-world implications." Zoe froze, stunned by his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, as though her ideas mattered, as though she mattered. Word of Dr. Mason's reaction spread quickly through the gym. Other competitors noticed and began whispering amongst themselves. One teenager, visibly irritated, stepped forward and accused Zoe of plagiarism. "There's no way someone like her came up with this," he sneered. "She probably stole it from online tutorials." The accusation caught Zoe off guard, and panic bubbled inside her. How could she prove she hadn't copied anyone? Before she could respond, security guards appeared, summoned by frantic event organizers trying to maintain order. Chaos erupted as people argued over who deserved credit for what. Rachel, frantically driving home after finishing her shift early, received a panic call from Zoe. "Mom, they're kicking me out." Zoe cried, her voice breaking. "They think I cheated." Rachel's heart sank. "Stay calm, sweetheart. I'm almost there." By the time Rachel arrived, Zoe and Dr. Mason were being escorted out of the building. Cameras flashed, capturing snippets of the scene, and whispers of scandal swirled in their wake. Was this the end of Zoe's dream, or would Dr. Mason's belief in her spark a new beginning? The parking lot outside the school was eerily quiet compared to the chaos inside. Zoe sat on the curb, hugging her knees tightly, tears streaming down her face. Rachel knelt beside her, brushing stray strands of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Tell me everything," she said gently, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Between sobs, Zoe recounted what had happened. The accusations, the whispers, the humiliation, it all poured out in a rush of emotion. "They think I'm a liar, Mom," she choked out. "They don't believe me." Rachel clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare they treat her daughter this way? But instead of lashing out, she wrapped her arms around Zoe and held her close. "Listen to me," Rachel whispered fiercely. "You didn't do anything wrong. You worked hard, and you created something incredible. That's all that matters." Dr. Mason stood nearby, watching the scene with a mixture of concern and resolve. When Zoe finally calmed down enough to speak again, he approached cautiously. "Zoe," he began, his tone calm but firm, "I know your invention is real because I saw it with my own eyes. And I believe in you." His words brought a flicker of hope to Zoe's dampened spirit. "But what about everyone else?" she asked quietly. "No one will listen." "They don't have to," Dr. Mason replied. "What matters is that you know the truth. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to help you take this further." Rachel looked at him skeptically. "How can you help?" "As a professor at Stanford, I have connections in the scientific community," he explained. "If Zoe wants, I can guide her through patenting her invention and presenting it to people who will understand its value." For the first time that day, Zoe felt a spark of possibility ignite within her. Could this stranger truly offer her a second chance? As they talked, Zoe noticed something odd, a group of students lingering near the entrance, watching them intently. One of them stepped forward hesitantly, holding out a small notebook. Hi," the girl stammered. "I just wanted to say, I think your invention is really cool." It was Emma, a classmate who had previously mocked Zoe during lunch. Her sudden change of heart caught everyone off guard. "I mean, I didn't get it before," Emma admitted, blushing. "But after seeing how those judges treated you, I realized maybe we were wrong about you." More students began approaching, murmuring apologies and offering support. Even Ms. Carter, Zoe's skeptical homeroom teacher, appeared, looking sheepish. "Zoe, I owe you an apology," she said sincerely. "I underestimated you, and I'm sorry. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." The tide seemed to be turning, but Rachel remained cautious. Why were these people suddenly rallying behind Zoe now, when they'd ignored her earlier? Was it guilt, or genuine belief in her potential? That evening, back at home, Rachel helped Zoe draft an email to Dr. Mason, thanking him for his offer. As Zoe typed, her hands trembled with excitement and fear. What if this was another dead end? Yet, deep down, she couldn't ignore the tiny flame of hope burning brighter than ever before. Just as Zoe hit send, the phone rang. It was Dr. Mason, calling with unexpected news. "There's someone who wants to meet you tomorrow," he said cryptically. "Someone who could change everything." Before Zoe could ask who, the line went silent. Who was waiting on the other side of this opportunity, and would they finally see Zoe for who she truly was? The next morning, Rachel and Zoe drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of Maplewood, where Dr. Mason had arranged the mysterious meeting. The air was thick with anticipation as they walked in, their footsteps muffled by the soft hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. At a corner table sat a woman in her late 40s, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed professionalism. Her sharp eyes softened when she saw Zoe approach. "Zoe, this is Ms. Evelyn Hart," Dr. Mason introduced warmly. "She's a venture capitalist who specializes in funding innovative projects, especially those focused on sustainability." Evelyn extended a hand, her grip firm yet reassuring. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Zoe. I've heard quite a bit about your invention." Zoe blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had ever looked at her like this before, with respect, curiosity, and genuine interest. She glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. "Thank you," Zoe managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Over coffee, Evelyn listened intently as Zoe explained the energy step in detail. Unlike the judges at the showcase, Evelyn didn't interrupt or dismiss her ideas. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions, probing deeper into the science behind the invention. By the end of the conversation, Zoe felt something she hadn't in weeks, validated. "This is remarkable," Evelyn said finally, leaning back in her chair. "Not only is it innovative, but it addresses real-world problems. Have you considered applying for a patent?" Zoe hesitated. I don't know how." "That's where I come in," Evelyn replied with a smile. "If you're willing, I'd like to fund the process and help bring your invention to market. Of course, this will require hard work and dedication, but I believe you have what it takes." For the first time, Zoe allowed herself to imagine a future where her dreams weren't just scribbles in a notebook, they were tangible, achievable goals. Just as Evelyn handed Zoe her business card, another figure appeared at the table, a local journalist named Sarah Bennett. "Excuse me," Sarah said politely, addressing Evelyn. "I couldn't help overhearing. Are you here because of the incident at the science showcase?" Rachel stiffened, exchanging a wary glance with Zoe. News of the showcase fiasco had spread faster than they'd anticipated. While some coverage might be positive, not all attention was good attention, not in a town like Maplewood. Sarah continued, turning to Zoe. "Would you mind sharing your story? People need to hear about inventors like you, young, passionate, and determined to make a difference. Zoe froze, torn between excitement and fear. Publicity could amplify her message, but also meant opening old wounds. Would people see her as a visionary, or still as that girl with a broken home? Rachel placed a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder. "We'll think about it," she said firmly, cutting off further questions. Once Sarah left, Rachel turned to Zoe. "It's your decision, sweetheart. Do you want to share your story with the world, or keep moving forward quietly?" As they drove home, Zoe stared out the window, lost in thought. The weight of Evelyn's offer and Sarah's proposal pressed heavily on her young shoulders. That night, unable to sleep, Zoe opened her laptop and began typing a draft email to Evelyn. But before she could finish, an alert popped up on the screen, a news article titled, "Local Girl's Invention Sparks Controversy." Someone had already beaten her to the punch. What did this mean for her dream and for her fragile sense of self-worth? The headline loomed large on Zoe's laptop screen, glowing harshly in the dim light of her bedroom. "Local Girl's Invention Sparks Controversy." Her heart sank as she clicked the link, bracing herself for what lay ahead. The article painted a messy picture, half-truths tangled with speculation, snippets of the showcase chaos mixed with unkind quotes from students and teachers alike. Worst of all, it dredged up old rumors about Rachel and Noah, framing Zoe's brilliance as some kind of desperate cry for attention. Rachel found her sitting frozen at the kitchen table hours later, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Oh, honey," Rachel murmured, pulling Zoe into her arms. She scanned the article quickly, her jaw tightening with each line. It wasn't fair, not to Zoe, not to either of them. "It's like they don't even care about the invention," Zoe whispered brokenly. "They just want to talk about everything else." "They're wrong," Rachel said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "None of that matters. What you created, it's real and it's important. Don't let their words take that away from you." But the damage was done. By lunchtime, the story had gone viral, plastered across social media feeds and local news outlets. Comments flooded in, ranging from supportive messages to cruel jabs. Some accused Zoe of seeking fame, others dismissed her invention outright. Even Evelyn called, concerned but resolute. "Zoe, this changes nothing," she assured her. "If anything, it proves how much your work deserves recognition." Still, Zoe couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been thrust into a spotlight she didn't ask for and wasn't ready to handle. That evening, as she flipped through the comments online, one stood out among the noise. It read simply, "Keep going. The world needs more people like you." Those 8 words hit Zoe like a lifeline. For the first time since the article surfaced, she felt a flicker of resolve. Maybe the world did need her, inventive, shy, imperfect her. The next day, Dr. Mason arrived at their apartment, carrying a stack of papers. "I thought you might need this," he said gently, handing Zoe a legal document. "It's the preliminary paperwork for patenting your invention. If we act quickly, we can secure your rights before anyone tries to claim otherwise." Zoe stared at the documents, overwhelmed. "What if I mess it up?" she asked quietly. "You won't," Rachel interjected, her tone fierce. "Because you've got us, and you've got yourself. You've already proven you're capable of so much more than anyone expected." As Zoe began filling out the forms, something unexpected happened. Messages started pouring in, not just criticism, but encouragement too. Strangers shared stories of their own struggles, thanking Zoe for inspiring them to keep fighting despite adversity. A teacher from a neighboring town reached out, inviting Zoe to speak at a STEM conference. Another email came from a non-profit organization offering resources to help develop her prototype further. Amidst the flood of responses, one name caught Rachel's eye, Noah. Zoe's father had sent an email, his first contact in years. His message was brief, almost clinical. "Heard about Zoe's project. Tell her I'm proud." Rachel hesitated, unsure whether to show it to Zoe. Pride wasn't enough, not after everything he'd put them through. Still, she printed the email and placed it on Zoe's desk without comment, leaving the decision to her. That night, as Zoe stared at her father's words, a question lingered in her mind. Could she forgive him? And more importantly, did she even want to try? Before she could decide, another notification popped up, a video call request from Evelyn. On the screen appeared not just Evelyn, but someone else, a representative from a major tech company interested in Zoe's invention. They wanted to meet immediately. This was her chance, but was she ready to step into the unknown? The video call felt surreal. Zoe sat cross-legged on the couch, her laptop balanced precariously on her knees, while Rachel hovered nearby, wringing her hands nervously. On the screen, Evelyn smiled warmly beside a man in a crisp suit, Mr. Alan Pierce, a senior executive from Green Tech Innovations, one of the largest renewable energy companies in the country. "Zoe," Mr. Pierce began, his voice smooth and professional, "we reviewed your invention, and we're impressed. Your concept has tremendous potential, not just as a standalone product, but as part of a broader solution for sustainable energy access." Zoe's heart raced. This was it, the moment she dreamed of yet never truly believed would happen. But instead of joy, a wave of doubt washed over her. What if they were wrong? What if she couldn't live up to their expectations? "We'd like to partner with you," Mr. Pierce continued. "Our team can help refine your prototype, scale production, and bring it to communities that desperately need affordable energy solutions. Of course, this will require commitment, not just from you, but from your family as well." Rachel cleared her throat, stepping into view. "What exactly does this partnership entail?" she asked cautiously. "My daughter is only 12. She shouldn't have to carry the weight of something so big alone." Mr. Pierce nodded, clearly expecting the question. "We understand her age presents unique challenges. That's why we propose a structured mentorship program where Zoe works closely with our engineers and designers. We'll guide her every step of the way, ensuring she retains full creative control over her vision." As he spoke, Zoe imagined herself walking through sleek laboratories, collaborating with experts who saw her not as a child, but as an equal. For the first time, the future didn't seem so daunting, it felt possible. But doubts lingered. Later that night, after the call ended, Zoe paced their tiny living room, wrestling with the decision. "What if I fail?" she asked Rachel, her voice trembling. "What if I let everyone down?" "You won't," Rachel replied firmly, kneeling to meet Zoe's gaze. "Failure isn't the end, it's part of growing. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here. You're stronger than you think, Zoe." The next morning, Zoe made her choice. With Rachel's support, she accepted the partnership offer, signing the initial agreement alongside Evelyn and Dr. Mason. It was official, the energy step was moving forward. Just as things seemed to stabilize, another curveball arrived, in the form of a letter from Noah. This time, it wasn't an email, it was handwritten, delivered to their doorstep. Inside, he wrote about his absence, admitting his mistakes and expressing regret. "I left because I thought I wasn't good enough, for you, for Zoe, for anyone. But seeing what Zoe's accomplished, it makes me realize how wrong I was. If there's any way to make amends, please let me know." Rachel read the letter aloud, her voice thick with emotion. Zoe listened silently, torn between anger and curiosity. Could she trust him now, after all these years? Before Zoe could respond, the doorbell rang. Standing outside was Noah himself, looking older and wearier than Zoe remembered. His eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "I'm sorry." For the first time in years, Zoe faced the man who had abandoned them and had to decide whether forgiveness was even possible. Noah stood on the doorstep, his hands trembling as he clutched the edges of his worn jacket. Zoe stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to demand answers for all the years he'd been absent, but instead, she felt frozen, unsure of what to say or feel. Rachel stepped forward, placing herself between Zoe and Noah. Her voice was firm but controlled. "You don't get to show up like this after 3 years," she said, her eyes blazing. "Not without earning it." "I know," Noah replied softly, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I don't deserve a second chance. But I'm here because I want to try. For Zoe." Zoe's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face to protect herself from the pain he'd caused. But another part, a quieter, braver part, wondered if maybe, just maybe, forgiveness could heal wounds that had festered for too long. Why now? Zoe finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why come back after everything?" Noah hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Because I saw what you did, the shoe, the invention. It reminded me of who you are, brilliant, determined, unstoppable. And it made me realize how much I missed, not just being your dad, but being someone worth looking up to." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotions. Rachel glanced at Zoe, silently giving her space to decide. After a long pause, Zoe nodded toward the living room. "Come inside," she said quietly. "We can talk." Over the next hour, Noah shared pieces of his story, how guilt and fear had driven him away, how he'd spent years trying to outrun his failures. He didn't ask for absolution, only understanding. Zoe listened intently, her mind racing. Forgiveness wasn't easy, it never would be, but she realized something important: holding on to anger wouldn't change the past. Maybe letting go could help shape a better future. As they talked, Rachel watched silently, her expression unreadable. When Noah finished speaking, she spoke firmly. "If you're serious about making amends, prove it. Be present. Show up, not just today, but every day moving forward." Noah nodded solemnly. "I will. I promise." Days turned into weeks as Zoe threw herself into her work with green tech innovations. Under their guidance, the Energy Step evolved from a rough prototype into a sleek, functional device capable of powering small appliances. News of her success spread far beyond Maplewood, drawing attention from scientists, educators, and even world leaders interested in renewable energy solutions. One evening, as Zoe stood backstage at a global innovation summit, she felt a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. The audience buzzed with anticipation, unaware that the keynote speaker was a 12-year-old girl from a small town no one had heard of before. When Zoe stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Spotlights illuminated her as she began to speak, her voice steady and clear. "When I started building the Energy Step, I didn't think anyone would notice. I just wanted to create something that mattered, to prove that even discarded wires and scraps could hold magic. What I didn't realize was that the real magic wasn't in the invention itself. It was in believing in myself and finding people who believed in me too." Her speech ended with thunderous applause, echoing through the auditorium like waves crashing against a shore. As she returned to her seat, Rachel wrapped her in a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. Even Noah, sitting a few rows back, wiped his eyes discreetly. That night, as Zoe scrolled through congratulatory messages online, one stood out, a simple note from Dr. Mason. "You've changed more than technology, Zoe. You've reminded the world what it means to see potential where others see nothing." Months later, life in Maplewood began to shift. People who once whispered behind Rachel's back now greeted her warmly, admiration replacing judgment. Zoe found friends among classmates who admired her courage and creativity. And though trust took time to rebuild, Noah slowly earned his place back in Zoe's life, not as the father who left, but as the one who chose to return. In the end, it wasn't fame or recognition that defined Zoe's journey. It was the quiet strength she discovered within herself, and the love and belief of those who stood by her side. On Zoe's 13th birthday, Rachel handed her a gift wrapped in shiny paper. Inside was a framed photo of the two of them standing beside the Energy Step, smiling proudly. Beneath it, Rachel had written a single sentence: "Never forget, you were always extraordinary." As Zoe hugged her mom tightly, she realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest sparks ignite the brightest flames. If Zoe's story inspired you, please hit like, share it with others, and subscribe for more uplifting content. Your support helps us bring stories of hope and resilience to life.